Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Great Conversations. A few weeks ago, Elementor, one of the biggest players in the WordPress industry, announced a layoff of 30% of their staff. They framed it as a reset of a healthy company, but let's honestly look at what's happening underneath the press release. It means like one of the most important, most dominant, and most deeply entrenched companies in this entire ecosystem, profitable by their own admission, still had to cut 30% of its people mainly because of AI. It's not just a reset, it's a company getting caught out by a shift it didn't move fast enough on. And if this is happening to Elementor, what does this mean for everyone else building products in WordPress? That's what we're here to dig into today. And I've got three people who are living this from quite different angles, so I'm super excited. We have Katie Keith here, founder of Barn2, 1.6 million a year in WordPress plugins, and right now in the middle of a deliberate shift into expanding beyond WordPress. We have Aurelio Volle. We just discovered he's the first returning guest on this podcast. So welcome back, Aurelio. Founder of WP Umbrella, bootstrapped to nearly 2 million AIR. And he's done that by going deeper into a specific niche rather than wider. And both of them also have in common that they are among the few people in the space who publish real numbers and share a lot of their successes, their thoughts, and their challenges publicly. And last but not least, we have Matt Cromwell, who coaches WordPress founders through Roots and Fruit and also co-hosts the WordPress product talk together with Katie. So they also heard the struggle from probably a dozen of founders and will be able to share some of their feedbacks and thoughts. So welcome all three of you. It's a pleasure to have you. Maybe let's start with your gut reaction when you saw the Elementor news a couple of weeks ago. What went through your heads?
Yeah, I was surprised because Elementor is just, they are thriving as far as anybody can see from outside. They have a ridiculous market share. Like, way more people seem to use them than the block editor, for example. It's quite incredible how well they've done. They've never been super transparent about things like revenue. They're very community focused in many ways, but in terms of their business and their revenue, they're actually not transparent, and apparently that's an intentional thing. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So I find it difficult to know whether this reduction in the workforce is a response to decreasing revenue as a survival thing, or an opportunity to increase profits because of the opportunities which AI has brought. And reading the press release, I wasn't super clear about that. Interested to hear what others think.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is mostly through several different teams, GiveWP in particular, and then working at Liquid Web through Stellar WP, and seeing seeing different companies downsize over a period of time, or sometimes they call it right sizing for different reasons, which sounds terrible when you're one of the people that's being off-boarded in this right sizing. But the truth is, companies will right size for a lot of different reasons and different motivations. I was surprised that it was 30%. Felt like that was very high, and that there must be specific reasons why it was that high. You can right size at 10%, 15% instead, and it feels a lot less like a big impact. But the truth is, like with big companies, honestly, that have hundreds of employees, sometimes the hiring process itself is just gets kind of like on automatic, and you end up like hiring a lot of people and it feels like growth. It feels like, hey, we have such a big team and we're growing so well, and sometimes folks right size because they just hired too many people for the wrong reasons in the first place. So it sometimes is just a matter of just cleaning up bad hiring practices. But that's why I would think like a 10% might account for that. And then other times maybe they're really trying to trim a lot in order to put additional new pressure on the people that stay, to say, hey, like AI should really be helping you produce a lot more work daily than it was before. And if it's not, like now's the time to figure that out. So these are all kind of like strategic reasons, not necessarily things that mean that there's a big bad ecosystem thing happening. I think the only other one that stood out to me, and definitely interested to hear what Aurelio has to say, but is that it coincided a little bit with their launch of Sticklight, which is a big AI platform that they're putting some attention on right now as well. And I don't know exactly what that means. Initially, they launched it as a WordPress agnostic platform, not related to WordPress at all. And then they suddenly said, well, actually, no, it has a lot of WordPress application too. So that this coincided with that also does seem a little bit interesting in my mind. So, Aurelio, what about you?
I don't have any insights about what's going on at Elementor, and I think it's hard to actually have a good opinion on what's going on. Probably, I mean, there is for sure some market correction after the blessed years, if we can call them like this, of COVID-19, where everybody wanted to have websites, and this is for sure. And I don't think we can take any learnings from this downsizing. What surprised me though is that Elementor, as Matt rightfully said, shipped a lot of new products. You know, there is like Elementor 1, there is this new AI thing. They have tried to close the loop and have everything in-house. And you still need people, even if you have agent and so much AI in everything you do, you still need people to train the AI chatbot, to review the code, to do things like that. So it's a bit surprising. And my reading, but it's mostly a guess, would be that they are aiming for full profit mode. You know, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Thank you all for your thoughts on that. I think it's not just Elementor that either seems optimizing or struggling or whatever it is in the end. We as you said, we can't know. But we hear that in a lot of conversations. We've all been to WordCamp Europe a couple of weeks ago, and Katie, you also posted a recap post about your experience there, and you shared that while the atmosphere was overwhelmingly positive in general, underneath it, it also spoken to a lot of product owners, and a lot of them told you that their new sales were down. Tell me a little bit about those conversations. What were people saying to you?
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of product people because our own new sales started dropping exactly 2 years ago and have continued to drop. And so I've been talking to a lot of product people. It's absolutely not universal, as we will hear in a minute. But so by talking to lots of people, I've been able to find some patterns as to who is the most vulnerable at the moment. Unfortunately, I think that my company falls into all of those patterns, which is unfortunate. And the reasons I gathered from the people I spoke to is that if they have, say, just started marketing or something like that, they can see growth. If you're starting from nothing, you can still grow. Actually, a year ago, acquired half of a product, Settery, a bulk editor, and we've doubled the sales. None of my established products that had already been marketing properly before that have grown, and yet Settery has doubled. So that fits into that, and also with other people I've met. If you are really, really dependent on organic SEO, then your sales are likely to be down a lot. We're amazing at organic SEO, unfortunately. And we've done lots of other marketing channels, but that is the thing that got us to where we are. And that is the thing which is increasingly struggling and is not effectively being replaced by AI. Also, the type of product is really important. So the people I've spoken to that tend to do quite small utility plugins typically are down more. A lot of Barn 2 plugins are utility plugins, like adding specific features to WooCommerce, for example, and they're easier to replicate with AI, of course. Whereas if you have a big platform, Even like Aurelio's product, I think it's a product, isn't it? WP Umbrella is fundamental to your infrastructure. That's not something you're just going to replace with AI. If a small thing that adds a little extra email field to WooCommerce or something like some of my plugins, very easy to replace with AI. And then finally, it depends on what niche within WordPress you are, because some are growing and some aren't. And most of my products are WooCommerce, which it's very hard to get good data, but I think WooCommerce might be down more than WordPress as a whole. So there's a lot of different things. That's not just me. All the people I talk to in these different categories are saying similar things. But across the board, the majority seem to be down.
Matt, is this something you speak to a lot of founders and product owners? Can you confirm this?
I think the sentiment in general, yes, for sure. And I depend a ton on Katie's transparency. So the things that she's been sharing, I think are valid for sure. And all of the things that she highlighted in terms of the risks or the reasons why some folks are down right now, I validate also the folks that are not down at the moment. There are plenty of platforms that are still growing. I haven't talked with any, except for I've seen a little bit from Aurelio about WP Umbrella and how well they're doing at the moment, which is good. But I haven't seen a lot that are actually really increasing really rapidly. But platforms that have more of a real moat and aren't utilities do tend to still be doing well. Any of the products that are a lot closer to their customers' revenue base are all still doing well as well. So think of like the Give WPs, the Paid Memberships Pro, the folks who are helping their customers also make money, or are a tool that helps them make money in one way or another. Like email platforms tend to be doing okay overall. But not at leaps and bounds. They're maybe seeing 5 or 6% growth, whereas in previous years they were hoping for 10 or more. So growth definitely has slowed down as a whole.
There was also a interesting moment at WordCamp Europe that I personally found very surprising. I don't remember who it was, but there was somebody on stage who asked the room to name 20 WordPress plugins. And people were generally struggling. And I think for an ecosystem with like tens of thousands of plugins, that's really a strange thing to witness. So, and this is probably not something that we can blame AI for. So, do you think this is not just like an AI product ecosystem problem, but also like a general visibility or marketing issue that we're looking at here?
There's a lot of reasons why I think that happened. I think people being put under that kind of like public pressure makes them always a little bit nervous and not able to perform at their best. But I think the easiest way to say that, to name that problem, is honestly branding. Like, I think it's a branding problem. People have a lot of websites and they put a lot of plugins on all of their websites. And they very often will be like, oh, I have like 30 plugins I use all the time. They can't remember the names of them because they don't care. They don't care about what the names of those plugins are. They're just like, oh, I need this one for managing my users. I need this one for adding widgets. I need this other one for they have them all. They don't care what they're called. They just need that functionality. But people tend to remember Yoast. They tend to remember that because it's a really good brand, despite whatever you might think about the actual colors and things like that. It tends to be a very strong brand. It's honestly something that I feel like we nailed really, really well with Give WP. Everybody knew that brand, whether they needed a donation plugin or not, because we were really good at brand. And you remember that plugin, and that's the benefit of a brand, is remembering them whenever you need it in the future. There's so many of these other ones that they're like, I want to pick on them a little bit. I'm Advanced Custom Fields. That's not a brand. That's a functionality. And you're like, well, what do I do when I need to add some custom fields to my site? I'll just search for custom fields. Oh yeah, that's what it's called, Advanced Custom Fields. it's not a brand, it's a functionality. So that's my reason why I think folks struggled on that front.
So do you think this is also a little bit a mismatch of where the marketing budget goes? Because I remember that you recently wrote or said something about that you think the product founders in WordPress are putting too much budget into acquisition, like ads, SEO, content, and affiliate, and what, especially since this is all getting a lot harder and more expensive.
Um, I don't know that I said that. I think I might have said the opposite, honestly. I I do think that, like Katie was saying, the game used to be organic. It used to be owned content marketing on your owned channels. And I think today it's still a content marketing play, but not on your own channels, it's on your unowned channels. You have to be able to get your content out to all the places where your audience is at all the time. And very often that does cost money. Um, I, I personally think most brands are not spending enough on their paid acquisition because they keep trying and failing at it. And it's not because paid acquisition doesn't work; it's because they're not good at it yet, and they just haven't had the patience to really figure it out. So I, I don't know. I would say probably the opposite. I think this is more of like discovery happens out in the marketplace. That's where people learn about products and plugins, and the more that you can get yourself out there, the better.
That actually resonates very well with what Emma Young has shared in the last episode,
Yep.
where she also stated, and I think she also mentioned that in her talk at WordCamp Europe, that I think it was 15% or something of AI visibility comes through your own website, and all the rest comes through all those other channels like affiliate partners, Reddit mentions, and whatever. That is often not really considered in products people's marketing, right?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day with GiveWP, we had an ad spend budget of 15% of revenue. That's what we were doing previously. When we came on board to Stellar, we actually started implementing that across all the other brands as well. They were doing closer to 5%. We increased all of them up to 15, and then we started increasing the entire Stellar budget up to 17 and 18% of revenue because we saw the returns that we were getting. But it was only because we had really good ad buyers that knew what they were doing. And today, honestly, I really think a lot of brands probably, if they're doing it well and right, probably could get up into 20% of revenue in order to continue to grow and see the numbers that they want. But it gets harder and harder. You do have to see that return in order to justify that kind of spend.
Okay, this is also something that you're considering. You've shared that you've been pretty successful in SEO in the past, and AI kind of just washed over that and destroyed channels that have worked so well for you in the past. Or is this part of your strategy, like um, reallocating the resources and marketing a little bit away from SEO and to other funnels like ads as well?
Yeah, that definitely needs to be part of the new strategy. First, it's worth mentioning SEO is still our biggest source of sales by far, despite everything that's happened. It's just far smaller than it used to be. So that is still important. And a lot of what you do for SEO also helps with the AI side of things. But you do need to change direction slightly to make sure you're thinking about AIs, even techniques like atomic sentences, answering the question right at the beginning of the article, things like that that help AI. They're good for real users and SEO as well, but you need to have that AI in mind. I saw Emma Young's talk as well about that stat. I actually mentioned that to Ellipsis, who were our marketing company until 6 days ago. That's a big change for us. And they said, hang on, that stat depends on the AI. Google AIOs that stat does not apply to. They're mostly looking at your website and your content, whereas other ones like ChatGPT, that's where the 85% would come in. So it depends on the LLM basically as to whether it's important. But clearly it's important. Again, it's always been important for SEO as well that high authority sites outside of your own site are talking about and recommending and linking to your products. So that hasn't changed either. We all need to be doing that. But the depressing thing is that however much you can get AIs to recommend you, I'm pretty sure that you're not going to get your previous sales. So let's imagine, first of all, you originally appeared at the top of Google for a particular key phrase or something. People click through to your website. They see your branding, how professional you are. They see your testimonials, your newsletter sign up, your calls to actions. They're much more likely to convert than if AI recommended you, because AI would recommend you alongside other solutions. They might recommend you alongside solutions that have a terrible website, but the person never knows that they're unprofessional and don't have good credibility and trust factors, do they? Until they click through. And also AIs are equally likely to recommend you alongside non-plugin solutions, like doing something in the block editor or whatever, or something maybe not even WordPress. They might recommend a SaaS or something instead. So however good we get at AI optimization, I don't think it's a solution for the lost revenue from SEO.
Probably, yeah. Aurelio, I think we're talking about how WP Umbrella is doing a little more in detail in a minute. But one question before that, as far as I know, you're growing a lot through infrastructure partnerships rather than ads or content. For example, WP Umbrella is now available on every Rocket.net account, or you're also deeply integrated with PatchStack. That's a slightly different distribution model than SEO or paid acquisition. How did you find the path, and do you think it's replicable for other product companies?
So I think there is a BA on LinkedIn because our main acquisition channel has been for 4 years SEO and word of mouth and organic. And distribution partnerships are very recent, and they are not like that important yet in what we are doing. And I think it's important to clarify that. To come back on the SEO topic, because I think it's important, we let the person who was doing our SEO go back in January or February, I guess. Now it's automatically being done by AI agents. Yesterday I had like a thorough analysis of what's going on our website, like what's converting, what's not working. Long story short, SEO is dead. As a matter of fact, as a source of traffic coming from search engine, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do content and stuff like this. So it's being picked up by LLM, but SEO as it used to be is dead, and all what we are getting from search engine is brand related traffic. Final stop, and whoever is still advising you to do SEO or try to do SEO, in my opinion, is wrong, or it's a lack of clarity on this acquisition channel. That's a very personal thing. Pardon. And I'm saying that knowing that we were doing a very good job at SEO in the past, and that this was my favorite acquisition channel. And when it comes to distribution partnerships, I would not advise anybody to do that. I think it's a distraction. It takes so much time. I don't know. I think we've been trying to do partnerships like this for the past 3 years. Go big or go home. We did 2 meaningful partnerships with 2 very singular companies. The first one is PatchStack, and they are super dynamic, super young, and we are able to release something within a day with them. But I think it's very unique, and we have this in common in our DNA. And Rocket.net, but Rocket.net took so much time, and my advice, if we are talking about product people, is to ignore this, because those guys are going to ask VIP feature. They are going to try to move your roadmap, and you will end up taking bad decision. And actually, it's very healthy that you can only do this kind of strategic partnerships when you are big enough, so you can say no if you think they are asking you something you shouldn't be doing. And actually, this is why it made so much sense with Rocket.net, because they didn't try to have something like a workaround, some custom development. They just came and say, hey, you have the best product. We don't want to do that. Can you do that for us? And then we worked out the technicalities, but that would be my advice to almost everyone. Don't waste. I have wasted so much time, and I have still many NDA going on, so I cannot disclose names. But as a founder and CEO, I wasted so much time and energy trying to integrate with very big WordPress people, and we spent time. And at the very end, it didn't happen. I even almost built the product of a competitor. So if you saw very many similarities with, we almost build it till the moment where, there is no financial agreement possible. And my advice is really like, follow your vision, find where your people are, and good feedback times, and eventually something might happen like it happened with Rocket.net.
I think that's actually very valuable advice for especially young companies, because I often have the impression that if they want to do partnerships, it's to kind of fix their own sales. So they're not where they are, where they want to be sales wise. And then the natural conclusion is like, yeah, let's create some partnerships and just have them use them as multipliers. And that just doesn't work. If you haven't succeeded in selling your product on your own, a partner is not going to do better than yourself, probably. Yeah. Matt, a different topic. A few weeks ago, you shared some thoughts on pricing psychology, especially in the WordPress freemium world. I got a quote here saying, in the WordPress freemium plugin space, it's basically a cardinal sin to consider raising rates on existing subscribers. But the folks who complain probably aren't really your ideal customers in the first place. So raise your rates with transparency, and your business will get healthier. I personally really enjoyed reading that, as you might know, as we've been advocating for the need of pricing maturity in this ecosystem for a while. So I would love to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's always important in these types of recommendations to give really good, strong caveats. Also, like all the things that Katie has been highlighting about her business and her customer base, probably not ideal to raise their subscription rates. Honestly, they're all of them are at risk for not coming back no matter what. But I was more speaking about some of these more platform products. Especially the ones that have been around for 10 plus years sometimes. They sold their early subscriptions at $39 a year sometimes. Like, I've seen some atrociously low pricing from 10 years ago, and it's amazing that they've been able to keep those customers this whole time. But the truth is, like, as a business and as a product, you've been pouring in so much value into your product over the last 10 years, and you haven't raised those rates for real reasons that I think are kind and good. But everything between a customer and a product, or a customer and a business, is also, it's a relationship, and there's both sides to the story. And it can get, honestly, at scale, it can get to the point at which the customer becomes costly to the business, honestly, in the long term. And more and more today, you really do want to be attracting customers that where the benefit is at least mutual, if not maybe a little bit better for the business long term, instead of the business taking on so much expense for the sake of these customers. I think the biggest thing I was trying to highlight there is that raising subscription rates is possible with the right amount of transparency, with the right amount of care, for the right reasons. and it doesn't, and it would result in the long term of being a lot healthier for the business, which honestly, a healthier business is better for the customer long term as well. So I just think in some way I was really hoping to spark a little bit of conversation with that post, to hear folks say what they have and haven't tried. I think the conversation that happened was more of like, why raise prices? And it wasn't enough of the actual meat and potatoes yet. But if we can have that conversation, that'd be great. Why are you all thinking of why is the pricing maturity so important to Greyd at the moment? I'm actually curious about that.
Yeah, what we think in general, I mean, when we entered the WordPress market, I think we were one of the first, at least publicly, to come up with a subscription-based pricing model. So at the beginning, all of our discussions were like, yeah, we're not paying subscriptions, we're not paying monthly, we want a lifetime license like we're used to in WordPress. And from our point of view, from a financial and financial perspective, lifetime licenses is just not something that is going to work in the long term, neither for the customer nor for the company, because like I said, if the company is not healthy in the end, that won't help the customer, because if the company stops being there, then they can't use the product anymore either. That plus, I think you've hinted at it also in your answer, that there are a lot of products out there who offer like a tremendous value, but are way underpriced, because we're having a pricing policy in WordPress where everything has to be super cheap, and most of the companies try to go for the very low tier pricing target group, that people are just used for so much being free and being super cheap, that it's actually quite hard to come in with products that, even if they provide like a lot of value and save a ton of costs and gain you a lot of efficiency, this super cheap pricing policy makes it actually difficult for products with what we call like mature pricing, which is completely normal in other industries, but in WordPress it's a little bit different.
Yeah. I think there is a case for having really low prices, but that's when you're trying to target having millions of users. Like you can have a really low priced thing if your strategy is lots of volume. But the truth is, so many products can't achieve that kind of volume at all. So it's much more ideal for them to raise their rates a bit, and then really know their customer really, really well, to be able to target that customer and price according to what the value that customer finds in your product. If you do that really well, then you'll find that you probably provide a ton more value than you even realize you do, and raising the rates then becomes a no-brainer. I've loved having conversations with customers when I come into the conversation being like, oh, we're thinking we're going to put this at like 149 a year, and they're like, really? We thought it was going to be like 1,000 a year. And those conversations were always really eye-opening to me, because it just shows the amount of value that we can provide to these users and the appetite that they have to be willing to pay for something that is that valuable for them. So
I think what's a really important part here is like you said, knowing your customer and really targeting your ideal customer profile, and not just anybody out there who might have an interest in your product. Already we've already hinted at it. While many in the industry are really struggling, Umbrella is actually thriving. You're fully bootstrapped. You grew the company from 0 to, I think, almost 2 million ARR in just 5 years. How much would you say is related to you having a really clearly defined customer profile from the beginning?
100%. And I think it's important to have what people actually call a product market fit. So you have a product and you have a price, and it works. And going back to the pricing discussion, I think it's very important to be fair and transparent, right? If you are fair with people, they agree to pay the price. And like we've never increased our pricing in 5 years. our storage costs have grown. We are offering much more value, but we have like a kind of transparency and fairness agreement with people. And I think this is why we also don't have any churn. Like if you are happy with the product and you know that the company is not going to screw you at some point, you don't consider for alternatives, which is also something important. On our growth, I think there is something that needs to be stated, because it's also important, and I don't want to get the wrong message that to give the wrong message that WordPress is growing so big. The truth is that almost all our users, they are coming from competitors. They are coming from lifetime main WP licenses, or they are legacy history user from managed WP. So it's not like we are growing the agencies. We are the representation of an agency segment that's growing. It's just that we are taking user from all our competitors, which is a slightly different narrative, I think.
I like to hear your thoughts on the ICP focus, because that's something that we also are very convinced that if you really know who your ideal customer is and you optimize everything for that particular customer group, that's the best basis to really scale a company. And I think that's not just applicable for pricing and these kind of things, but also for features. So if you know who your ideal customer is, you can actually focus in the features as well, not just add anything that somebody asks for, but really focus on the features that solve a concrete pain for your ideal customer profile. I think that's something that WP Umbrella is also doing, right?
This is such a no-brainer for me. If you don't have a clear ICP, you cannot have a company. Like it's not like should we have a clear ICP. For me, if you don't have a clear ICP, there is no point. And actually, you never go deep enough into your ICP, because we are a product for agencies, right? But there are agencies that are managing 20 sites, and last week, we had an agency who moved more than 1,000 sites on the WP Umbrella. And you have to ask yourself, for whom my tool should be working best? Because if it's just one guy with 1,000 websites, and on the other hand, I have like 3,000 or 4,000 clients that have just 20 websites, I should probably try to prioritize the small agencies with 20 sites, right? Well, that's not what we are doing, but it was to give like a clear example. So we do the other way. We target people that are managing more than 200-300 websites, and we fix their pain points, final stops. And when we get a feature request from a guy who want to, for instance, it came a lot like, hey, I want to get an email about the update available on my WordPress sites. As soon as you manage more than 50 websites, you just don't give a hoot about available update. You just automate everything and that's it. So ICP is everything, and inside your ICP, you need to understand your true ICP. And this is tied to your vision of your product, who you want to serve, and so on and so on and so on.
Katie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because that's one thing to do for one platform or one product, but you sell a bunch of small products, a bunch of plugins. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a weird one for us. People think of us as a WooCommerce company, but our biggest product is actually not WooCommerce. It's Document Library Pro. And earlier this year, we did huge analysis of our top plugins and exactly who was using them. And we're actually surprised with the outcome. For example, we discovered that Document Library Pro is more than 40% of its users are non-profit. We had no idea. We've been selling this plugin for 5 years. It's our biggest product by a long, long way. And we didn't even know that it targets non-profits. Then you've got things like healthcare, education, that sort of thing. So a very specific ICP, which we did not plan and we were not aware of. Clear opportunity in our marketing. And we've made a lot of decisions as a result of discovering this. for example, just this weekend, I've launched a new product, which is a hosted SaaS version of Document Library Pro that you can embed in any platform, so beyond just WordPress. And that's because now I know the ICP. I know that a lot of these sites are not on WordPress. They might use other CMSs. They might use something completely bespoke. And so the fact that we were just WordPress was really limiting our ability to reach these people that would benefit from the product. And so looking back, I can't believe I went for so long without knowing. So you don't have to choose your ICP necessarily. You could, if you've already got an established product, do that analysis and create it retrospectively, and then think, is your marketing appropriate? Is your targeting appropriate? How can you do everything better with that in mind?
And you should probably also do that regularly. I mean, I like that example of yours that you kind of discovered that in retrospective, but that can also change with your product developing. And that's also something that happened to us. For example, at Greyd, at the beginning, we also went in quite broad and kind of targeted a lot of different target groups, but it turned out that more and more of our customers were using us for very specific use cases, all those multi-location, multi-website kind of cases, and that developed slightly in that direction. And now we did the same thing. We did a lot of analysis. We talked to a lot of customers to hear about why they're using our product, what the most important features for them are, what the most important values are that they are getting from the product. And then we were able to adapt the entire marketing copy and the entire targeting process to that specific to a customer group. And now we're also able to focus feature-wise, put a much bigger focus on the features that are relevant for exactly these kind of use cases. In general, I'd love to hear from both Katie and Aurelio. As I said, you're both very transparent on your numbers. Aurelio, for example, you share monthly updates on how our WP umbrella is doing. Katie, you're sharing all your thoughts and strategic moves. Is this a deliberate strategy to build trust, or what's the reason behind that?
Do you want to start, Katie?
Okay. For me, it was never a deliberate strategy. It was more like, why wouldn't you? I think I feel a little bit protected because I have so many products. Like I just told you, Document Library Pro was my biggest. I didn't tell you the revenue. You know the total revenue. You don't know the per product revenue. So I think that protects us a bit from competitors. Compared to if you were just a one product company, maybe by telling the world how big that product is, other people would think, oh, if that's a big market, I'll copy. So I feel a bit protected by that. And with that in mind, I think, why not? And it makes people more transparent with me. For example, I was saying earlier that at WordCamp Europe, I was just asking everybody how their sales are doing. I kind of feel justified doing that. I feel quite confident with it because I'm open. If I didn't give that information, then it would be a bit weird. But because I've told everybody my revenue, I can ask them and they may or may not answer, but it just opens the door to these conversations and helps me get a really good context. So I know that what's happening isn't just happening to me and things like that. It just makes everybody learn and grow together.
And what Katie said about inspiring others to just do what you say is very true, by the way. We got copied by so many hosting companies who try to, they saw the number, they thought it would be easy, and hopefully it's not. And actually, it's good because it's growing awareness on the need people have for a tool that controls everything. So for us, it's actually always a good marketing when someone open a competitor. Surprisingly, for us. There are a few things. The first one is that we are bootstrapper. And when you don't have money, you have to start somewhere, right? So we did SEO because it was the only thing we could afford. And we were very good at SEO. And then we started to do LinkedIn. But on LinkedIn, you need to share useful and valuable content to people. So why not share our journey, knowing that our users, they are all entrepreneurs, and the truth is, I think now with AI, it's a bit different because they can start building products. But before AI, it was impossible for an agency to be an agency and a product company. And I think it was very refreshing for people to read what we were going through, success, failure, what we learned. And it was also a way to start to be known, and we are still very unknown, even in the very little WordPress ecosystem that goes to WordCamp. There are so many people that don't know us. And last but least, the trust of the people using Managed WP was damaged very badly after acquisition. Things stopped to evolve. The price didn't increase, which is something people don't recognize, but I think it's something that the Managed WP team and GoDaddy did actually very well. They stick the price to what it was back in the days, and we should acknowledge that. But the trust was damaged, and what we do is core to the business of agencies. It's a tool that they are using every day, and many of them have built their processes, their sales processes, their SOP, their SLA around what Managed WP was offering. And so we needed this extra credibility, this extra trust to convert them. And like Cathy said, why not share everything? What do I have to hide? Because what we are doing is so hard. I mean, being a remote WordPress backup company is the hardest thing you can do. So it's not going to be copied overnight by anyone, and you shouldn't, because to be honest, if I knew, I would have done something else. I would have done, I don't know, like an accounting software or something much easier than a tool to manage WordPress sites. So that's for us, that's like those 3-4 reasons. Start somewhere, give value, and build trust, and know it's. I think now there is also a bit of ego into sharing everything and being someone, and it's funny to go to places and having people you don't know that come to you, that thanks you for what you are sharing, and it's it's something I like doing actually.
It's really interesting to hear, because that's Matt, you can probably relate to that when you speak to a lot of founders. I think a lot of them are kind of hesitant to share actual numbers and to speak about not just the successes, but also like about the challenges and difficult phases they go through publicly, right?
It depends. Sometimes I think a lot of them are more and more emboldened by seeing folks like Katie. And previously, I think the godfather of transparency was Pippin Williamson. He's actually a really young guy. It's weird calling him a godfather, but early in the WordPress days, and he would share his numbers and his pains and struggles and failures without anybody ever asking. And everybody in the ecosystem learned from him, myself primarily. And I think that's what's great about the WordPress space, is that how open we are. And even when we know we're competing in the same space sometimes, we very often consider each other frenemies instead of competition. I think that all of that is really important to this ecosystem and helpful. There's a guy in the space I really respect and admire, Ben Pines. He actually was a long time ago was running content at Elementor, and now he does coaching and fractional work. And he talks a lot about founder-led marketing. And today, that type of tactic, I'll just call it, is really, really valuable. And people are finding that to be really successful for their products when the founder is the face of the product, and that they use their expertise to talk about why they build the things that they build. I think that's a really valuable thing, and more founders are finding that to be how they find their own voice. I think the reason why the ones who struggle, the ones who say, "Yeah, that's just I don't want to talk about numbers and things like that," it's usually just because they don't want to talk on social media at all in the first place. They just are a lot more, uh, you know, antisocial folks, or introverted folks who don't want to be out there as much. For them, I'm usually trying to help them to understand that, okay, well, then you need to get your brand to do that work. And having your brand do that work is a lot harder because folks don't resonate as clearly with brands as they do with people. But one way or the other, you got to do that work, either you as a person, as a founder, or get your brand to be out there and telling these stories in meaningful ways. Um,
What we do, because I think you start to do founder-led marketing, because again, it was cheap, you know.
yeah.
So we had to start somewhere. Now what we are doing is people-led marketing. So it's not only me, because this cannot scale, but we share like what's happening inside the company. So we have Dorothy, who is working in the support department, who is now doing movies about product update. Boris is sharing stuff on support, and my CTO is sharing technical stuff. And if you work at WP Umbrella right now, you need to be a bit on social. And this is important because AI is a good way to speed up what you're already doing, right? But it's also, and everybody should do that. Everybody should step aside, look at what's going on, look at the resources, look at how they are allocated, and say, hey, but do I need today 3 people in customer support while my chatbot is killing 60% of the tickets? Faster and better, because faster. And for us at WP Umbrella, the answer was, well, no, it's not. But I have valuable people in my team. And I don't want to downsize the company. So we offered people alternative jobs. So for instance, Dorothy started to do movie. Boris is doing some QA engineering stuff and he's moving. And you can turn all your employees into superhero.
Mhm.
So let them be, I mean, this is a long stretch from why we went from founder-led to people-led marketing.
Yeah.
But I think it's important.
Katie's actually been doing a very similar thing, right, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. We had until recently 8 support engineers. I take a bit of exception at something Matt said earlier about people that overhired, because we hired for our sales at the time to meet customer needs. So in the first half of 2024, we hired 2 more people because our sales were growing rapidly. We had no way of knowing that that was going to stop and go decline for the next 2 years. So I don't feel we overhired, but we ended up with far too many support people. And sadly, I let 2 of them go in April, which was really difficult. We still don't need 6. They know we don't need 6, but I have done exactly what Aurelio said and tried to use them in many other areas of the company. 2 or 3 of them are doing a lot of marketing. Support people can be great at marketing because they have excellent product knowledge, they're good communicators, and also they're good writers. So a lot of those skills can go into marketing. And also things like testing, they can be good QA testers. I'm training one of them up on MailChimp because that's always very neglected because I don't like email marketing, and really trying to use them to maintain those jobs for as long as possible when we don't need them on support. So yeah, we're definitely doing that.
Yeah. I just want to clarify that I really wasn't talking about teams your size.
I know.
I was from the perspective of the Liquid Webs, even the Elementors, the
big
folks that
ones,
have hundreds of employees. They sometimes end up, hiring all the time, and then realizing too late
because
that
it's just a
they,
default answer
yeah,
to
yeah.
Katie, I would like to discuss a little bit more on the product strategy, because you're doing an interesting thing at the moment. You shared a little bit of that strategy also at PressConf. You're diversifying into Shopify. I know it's still quite early for that, but can you share a little bit on the reasons why you decided to do that, and maybe also share some first insights on how that transition is going?
Yeah, well, the trigger was really the WordPress drama. I had always felt WordPress was incredibly stable and a good horse to back. And then when I saw reputational damage be done to WordPress towards the end of 2024, I realized that while I was diversified across many products, my business was 100% WordPress. And if one person could damage its reputation in a way that could potentially affect the user base, and I don't know if it has, but the fact that I could see that was possible scared me. And so, as a mostly WooCommerce company, I thought Shopify is the obvious place to go as in terms of expansion, because while we didn't have any experience with Shopify, we have a lot of e-commerce experience which is transposable to Shopify. So we decided to start building Shopify apps, and we haven't really made any money from it yet, but that's largely because everybody advised me to launch our app for free to get reviews. So we've literally only gone paid in May. It's all very new. And PressConf was really interesting because it kind of consolidated my thinking about the multi-platform thing. And I'd thought about doing this hosted document library pro for ages, but it was a few conversations I had with different people, one of whom was Matt at PressConf, which made me think, nobody wants a hosted document library, but people do want document libraries for different platforms. So that could really expand our market. So that was an interesting thing that led to that. And in addition, in the last few months, a lot of people within WordPress, again, including Matt, but also people like Devon Walker, Justin Ferryman, have written about how you should solve a problem first. Stop thinking of yourself as a WordPress company and instead thinking about yourself as solving a particular problem for a particular group of people who may be on WordPress. They may be somewhere else. So you need to go where they are. And my work on the document library side of things is very much that. I'm actually also building a Squarespace and a Wix app just to bridge it with my hosted platform. So I've got Fable working very hard today on the last day it's free, building Squarespace and Wix apps. So yeah, it's all about going to where the customer is. And this isn't putting WordPress down. WordPress is still the biggest platform by a mile in terms of CMS. It's about going to where the customer is.
Matt, from your perspective, is diversifying across different platforms something that, in theory, every WordPress founder should be thinking about, or does it only make sense once you've like hit or outgrown a certain niche?
Yeah, I think the way Katie talked about her specific journey and her specific motivations for going into Shopify, and especially doing the hosted Document Library Pro one, is exactly the time at which you start to think about getting outside the WordPress space. I mean, it's one another way that I might say it is like, stop thinking like a dev. Like in the WordPress space, so many folks built everything because they were developers, which is great and amazing and scrappy. But like, if you want to win in the market, you have to think about your customer. Like that's what I want to say over and over and over again is like, chase your customer, chase your customer, chase your customer. And your customer so often doesn't even know that they are on WordPress sometimes, or they don't even know that they are on Shopify or Squarespace or Wix or whatever. They often don't know these things. But if you go chasing after what their needs are and how you can help serve more of their needs, then you will build the tool to help them. And it doesn't matter whether that's a WordPress tool or a self-hosted tool or a Chrome extension or whatever it might need to be. You're chasing the customer instead of having a problem that's trying to find a customer. I think that in so many ways, that's kind of it's been the WordPress way, is like, let me create a solution and then go find all the problems, or let me create a solution, then chase after a whole bunch of customers who don't need me. And it just doesn't work that way anymore. We really have to chase the customer first and have our solutions be going after what their needs are. And if that is outside of WordPress, so be it. WordPress is a medium, not a solve, not a solution in and of itself. So
we've actually discussed like different strategies on how to chasing new customers quite a bit today. Aurelio, one of the numbers you share regularly is also the churn rate, which in May, for example, I think was down to 1.6%. Is this due to deliberate retention work that you're doing, or is this like just a byproduct of who or what and how you sell?
Maybe I'm a bad entrepreneur, but but maybe a lack of ambitions, but we are profitable, and we are more profitable than we will ever need, I think, to be able to pay the team, to pay the infrastructure, to pay ourselves well. And so at the end of the day, I don't have problems. I only have problems if my users are leaving. So, and we had a whole discussion about this with Katie, I think last week. The priority at WP Umbrella is fixing a bug and making sure that the people we have are happy. But this is also a consequence of being a bootstrapper, because again, I cannot spend 20. I mean, no, I could, but back in the day, I had not any money to spend on acquisition. So we were obsessed about keeping the people we had paying users. And we still are. And as a matter of fact, we are every month looking for a way to diminish churn. And recently I realized that I had no joining campaign, but the one offered by default by Stripe. And so I implemented something and we killed involuntary churn, which was our main cause of churn. We diminished it from like 44% of our churn to 21, just with a customer IO campaign. And we spend time on that because, in my opinion, if you're even and profitable, your obsession should be about keeping your people happy. Because then our main acquisition channel nowadays is word of mouth. It costs 0. It's slower than what I wish it could be, but the company is growing month after month. But maybe I lack ambition, but it's the path we've been taking from day one.
And it seems to work pretty well. Matt, Katie, are there any other key takeaways from the retention gap product talk episode that you think are worth mentioning here as well? Because I think that's a lot of product companies actually struggle way more than when WP Umbrella to keep their customers.
Yeah, I think that is incredible because like websites just stop existing. When I've surveyed people that didn't renew, a lot of them just aren't on WordPress or WooCommerce anymore. They just don't exist anymore. So to have such low churn is incredible, given that those things would not be under your control anyway. I know that Matt has a nice story about something they did at Give with the phone calls that is quite innovative.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the space, so many folks struggle with churn because they don't spend time on it, especially the way that Aurelio has. I mean, the saying goes that it's so much easier to keep existing customers than it is to find new ones. And I find that to be very, very true. And I think that that's a big reflection of the success that Aurelio's been experiencing. Um, and and we focused super hard on it as well. And we also, just like Katie said, there were lots of reasons, legitimate reasons, why people had to stop paying us. Like that, they were like, we were a fundraiser, a charity, and our charity doesn't exist anymore, so we can't use your plugin anymore. We can't do a whole lot about that, but we very much, anytime there was something that we could help prevent, we worked really, really, really hard to try to prevent folks from leaving if they didn't have to. And like Katie said, we had a small team that when we got acquired by Liquid Web and worked at Stellar, I grew that team by a lot across all of the Stellar brands to work on both of those accidental churn reasons. Yeah, honestly, that's the best place for any brand to start is like Aurelio said, just focus on the accidental churn because that's just money on the table that you're just not doing anything with. It's actually relatively straightforward to try to recover that revenue, and Stripe alone really doesn't do a good enough job. So having some sort of manual or human or even automated follow-ups to help folks on that front can bring in some good stability out of the gate. But every single time somebody asks for a refund, we would always say we have a one question policy. Everybody says no question policies. We said we had a one question policy. And it was usually, why or can we help you? And it was because we needed to know why people were leaving us so that we could fix that problem in one way or another. If it was a competitor issue where the competitor has a better feature than we had, then we needed to figure out how to get parity there. If it was a problem with our team, then we needed to figure out how to fix our team. No matter what the problem was, we needed to know what it was, or else we couldn't fix anything. So I was particularly dogmatic about trying to get refund reasons or cancellation reasons or churn reasons for every single time that we lost a customer in one way or another. And I can tell you that we also, like, just by paying attention, we went from like a 17% churn rate to a 7% churn rate very, very quickly. And that's what I maintained across all the Stellar brands, 7 or less. So.
And about churn, Sandra, I think there is something worth explaining on my side. We have a pay-as-you-go pricing. So, again, being fair and transparent. And we have no commitment. So if you're an agency and you lose a client, we don't have churn. Our client just removed one website and we have a little revenue attrition, which is very fair for everybody, which is also why we've never been willing to do packages. And I think this is also why our churn is so low, because for instance, this morning, because again, like if someone quickly remove, let's say 5 or 10 websites, I don't have the exact number in mind, from WPMRA, we send an email, hey, what's happening? Can we help you? Do you have a problem? And this morning a guy said, no, I have just lost like a bunch of clients and I'm doing the cleanup. Oh, okay. And then we have nothing to worry about because we cannot control that our clients are losing clients.
Yeah. I think that's really important caveat to make really super clear. Like your customers are agencies by and large, and that's a very specific type of customer. And I love your model where you're only charging what the agency actually needs and uses. That definitely changes the numbers. If there's plugin shops out there thinking, how can I ever get to a 1.6% churn rate? I don't think that's realistic for most normal plugins. Your situation is unique, so I think that's important context to add.
Thank you for that. Guys, I had a bunch of more questions prepared for this episode, but we are already way over an hour. So I want to thank all of you for sharing so much advice and experience and your thoughts on these topics. I think we had some very valuable takeaways for our audience today. Is there anything we haven't covered today that you say this must be mentioned in this episode? Any advice you want to give, or where to start looking at which is the most important thing that the people should focus on right now? Is there anything you want to share on that?
We didn't speak about AI, which is refreshing, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you're already into product, my advice would be step back and look if you can reallocate your resources, if your users still need you. If they don't, how can you help them? Because what's for sure is like right now, no matter what we can say about the market, the pricing structure is changing and nobody is really understanding what's happening. Some people are telling you that cloud is going to kill your business. Some people are growing. And the truth is you need to stay alert. And I think it's a very important to be adaptive and agile right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. My advice would be to really analyze what are your products and how do they fit into the new world and the way things are going. It may be they don't. Some of my products I don't believe are relevant for the future, and I'm focusing on the ones that hopefully are. Same with your marketing. Think about what channels you're using and are they the future of marketing? If not, you may need to change direction.
Yeah. I think my best advice is what I share with most of my coaching clients. However much time and or money you're spending on marketing right now, it's not enough. You should probably double it, most likely. That's just the nature of the world we're in right now. Don't ship that next feature. Instead, talk to your customers a ton more.
That's a great advice to end the episode. Thank you very much for that. All three of you, thank you very much for taking that time. And to all of you out there, see you in the next episode.